I'm excited to get your perspective on this topic today because after U.S. forces launched an operation in Venezuela that ultimately led to the capture of the country's sitting leader, Nicolas Maduro, President Trump has repeatedly voiced his desire to acquire Greenland. He says that the United States needs this territory for national security purposes. So to start off the conversation, what do you make of the U.S.'s push to acquire Greenland?
Well, I think that the stated rationale is kind of self-evidently bullshit, if that's a phrase I can use on the podcast. The uh, the Danish government and the Greenlanders have offered the United States and President Trump any concession that he wants to help them to help him secure Greenland against Russian and Chinese depredations to increase Arctic security. They've taken any number of initiatives, and they have offered President Trump well, pretty much anything except sovereignty over Greenland, and he has refused those offers. So I think we can rule out the idea that this is about Arctic or U.S. national security. Simply isn't.
And President Trump has said that anything short of the Greenland being in the United States' hands, that's unacceptable. That's what he posted on Truth Social this morning. You recently penned a piece called How Greenland Falls. I want to talk about it because President Trump has mentioned Greenland and the United States acquiring it. He first floated this idea in his first term, the United States buying Greenland. People took that as a joke. President Trump has been known to say bombastic things. Now people are taking that really seriously. So how did we get here?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think when President Trump first brought this up in 2018, 2019, people didn't take it very seriously. And But since then, a couple of things have happened. First, the president has been pretty consistent about this since 2018, 2019. I wouldn't say he does it all the time, but he brings it up intermittently, and he seems quite serious about it. Secondly, he's demonstrated a greater tendency and capacity to actually operationalize his bombastic whims. We saw that most recently in Venezuela, where his ideas about regime change became true, or his idea about changing the president became true. And the reason for this seems to be that he has a much more loyal coterie of officials in his second administration. They're much more willing to turn Trump's bombasts into actual policy, and they're much more capable of it. And so I think it's become a necessity for people to treat sort of Trump's statements that seem bombastic in the first term as quite serious in the second term. And Greenland is, I think, high on that list because it's been such a consistent message of the president.
President Trump said that the Monroe Doctrine was justification for what went down in Venezuela in early January. And after Maduro's capture, President Trump said that we've now superseded the Monroe Doctrine. He now calls it the Don Roe Doctrine. So what did you learn from what the world saw in Venezuela, paired with this Don Roe Doctrine foreign policy that applies to how you view President Trump is now looking at the next steps to acquire Greenland?
I mean, it's not that hard to apply it, right? I mean, the doctrine that they've essentially propounded is that the Western Hemisphere belongs to America, and America can do whatever it wants in the Western Hemisphere, and that any opposition to U.S. Geopolitical desires in that hemisphere, whether they come from an indigenous government like the Venezuelan government, or whether they come from an outside force like the Danish government or the Russians or the Chinese, is illegitimate, and the U.S. is within its rights to do anything they want about it. That's not exactly the Monroe Doctrine. It is kind of the Roosevelt corollary of the Monroe Doctrine, which we've had now for 125 years. So it's not precisely new. It's probably also not what is motivating the president in either Venezuela or Greenland, particularly in Greenland. It seems to be that this is because, as I said, in Greenland, he could have had any of the security results he wanted. The Danish government was completely and is completely cooperative. I think what's going on here is a desire for personal aggrandizement, as a sort of real estate mogul, someone who thinks in those terms, the idea of extending territory, being the president to make the United States yet larger, is something that he hopes will secure his place in history, put his face on Mount Rushmore, maybe rename it to Mount Trump. I don't know.